So what is up, guys? For those of you who may not know me, I am Lucas, or Founder Jackson, and I have been a wrestler for 20 years. I've also been a wrestling fan for about getting over 30, maybe near 40 years as a wrestling fan. I've mainly watched WWE and WCW back in the day. And I thought I'd take this time to be able to sort of give my opinion on some things that are going on in the wrestling industry. Some of this stuff, by the way, guys, will be wrestling based. Some of it won't be, so make sure that you follow and like everything for more information as the weeks and months and hopefully years go on. So, we're going to begin with the big story coming out of the week, really, as John Cena announced and did a hell of a lot. He was the man of the hour, or the 1 hour man, really, because he pretty much had the entirety of the first hour of Raw to himself last night. And there's lots of speculation as to what would go on, as there always is in wrestling. Anyway, so John Cena, he comes out, well, eventually comes out, because obviously Triple H had to come out first and hold the spotlight and make things about him for a little bit first, and then we went into, obviously, John Cena coming out in front of a very raucous hometown crowd. Obviously, he's from West Newbury, just down the road from the TD Gardens, and he comes out and yeah, he kind of thanks the fans thank him. You know, but there's a bit of a love change going on. Triple H is just still there in the ring for some reason. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's not anything to do with you, but hey ho. But then out comes the Intercontinental Champion, Dominic Mysterio, and he interrupts John and he gets booed big time. And then they end up doing something which I didn't think they'd do. I didn't think they'd do as they did it, where they booked an impromptu championship match for the Intercontinental Championship between Dominic Mysterio and John Cena. And it wasn't for that night's main event, because that was all to come. We've got lots to talk about. That involves War Games, which we'll get to later on. So John Cena wins the IC Championship, completing his Grand Slam. Now, I've got a lot to say about the whole John Cena situation and kind of what's gone on this year, you know, with him. I don't think he's been done the best service. I think that there's been like some highs, you know, but there's been those lows, and there's been that big elephant in the room that we all can't forget, the fact that they decided to do that angle they did at the Chamber, and all the kind of nonsense that, you know, they try to put it on their Unreal series, and it's been talked about on podcasts elsewhere to death, and they do seem to be like blurring that line between reality and fiction and what's happening. But you know, in my opinion, like, it just didn't work. And the proof of the pudding as to why it didn't work is the fact that they turned him babyface again by the time it came to SummerSlam, and the stuff post SummerSlam has been much better than anything he did before SummerSlam. It's very crucial. I mean, they teased so much of this. Obviously, even teased, you know, R-Truth got released and came back, and the teased, you know, him getting a serious side, and that's now gone back to R-Truth being R-Truth. Which, look, again, if that's R-Truth's lane, like, I get that. You know, that's what he does best. You know, fair enough. But it just felt like there was a lot there, and but maybe afterwards we need to wait for all kind of the dust to settle, basically, and then we can maybe have time to be in the room to discuss it fully. But look, I think this was the correct move. I know some people, I've seen some comments from fans who aren't particularly happy that, you know, Dom's lost to John Cena, and there is a title picture, or a picture with the championships now, where obviously you got CM Punk, you know, 48 years old, the current world heavyweight champion. You've also got AJ Styles, you know, again in his late 40s, one half the tag team champions, and now you've got John Cena, you know, again late 40s and winning a championship belt. But I think this is being done for the right reasons, and something which I'll then get onto now, with discussing John Cena's final match, final date. Something he did announce as part of that opening promo was the fact that we will be seeing kind of NXT versus main roster wrestlers on the last Saturday night's main event alongside his final match. So John Cena said he wants to take this time to give back, and he wants to go out leaving the industry better than when he began. And it definitely makes sense. It definitely fits into the criteria. I know some people may feel a bit shortchanged by that. Like, I've seen some comments from people being like, well, you know, we paid premium money for a, a main roster show, and I guess that's why they are still going to fulfill some of the main roster stars being on it. But to be real, at the moment, there's a lot of NXT talent, particularly on the championship side of things, like some people like a Ricky Saints. You've got people like Obafemi, who again hasn't really made a main roster debut, but I think, and then someone else I think could benefit from this, someone like Joe Hendry, which I'll get to later on actually. We will see John Cena, pass the torch, so to speak, to someone. And I think this is his way of kind of saying the whole evening might be a case of passing the torch. And so I think that, there's a big elephant in the room here when it comes to two people in particular, one of whom is seemingly out of contract with AEW, but one of whom is definitely seems to be still hired by AEW. In that people still think there's a lot of noise that people think that the last match is going to go to one of these two people, and those two people, let's cut the cord, are Edge and or Chris Jericho. And I just think Cena, kind of his promo last night and how he kind of put things, and the fact that he's now the champion as well, I think that he is understanding that he knows he wants to give back, in this. So I do feel that we are leaning more towards it being a newer wrestler, over an established star, which again we can debate until the cows come home, I guess. But it'll be interesting what happens. Obviously, there were some more stuff with the last time is now tournament going on, including new draws. So just to let people know that both Sheamus and Rusev, they advanced. Rusev defeated Damian Priest, and Sheamus defeated Shinsuke Nakamura in a very hard-hitting match, actually. So that obviously sets them two up again. Sheamus and Rusev don't have another clash next time, in the next round, sorry. And then we also got the announcement of two matches taking place on Raw next week, those being Javon Evans of NXT. He will take on Gunther. And it's just crucial here because they announced the return of Gunther. Which obviously many people thought he'd be a surprise, thought that either he'd be a surprise obviously in the brackets, or that he'd come out and confront the winner, of the tournament. But it seems like obviously they've announced him, but then they announced the next one, and that was an interesting one because, so we did get Solo Sikoa announced for the tournament, but similarly to how Nick Aldis did the whole I'm going to make you wait and see, who's facing LA Knight on Friday Night SmackDown, Nick Aldis did the same thing here, where he refused to reveal who would face Solo Sikoa next week. And so, we've got the situation here where Solo Sikoa, I don't remember last time he actually had a match. He's led, obviously, the MFTs around SmackDown the last few weeks. They've been having a conversation with the White Six. So someone could say, yep, it is someone in the White Six, potentially, because that could further that feud over on SmackDown. But then there's obviously, again, those elephants in the room, and especially with being Madison Square Garden, where you're like, is this going to be Jericho? Like, is this going to be Jericho? Raw lately, to be fair to it. And I thought Raw last night in particular was very, very good. In terms of, not that I'm liking everything they're doing at the moment, but I think that in terms of what a weekly television show should be looking to do, Raw has ticked many more boxes than SmackDown has. That's the last few weeks, easily. Solo Sikoa, could be coming to Raw to fight like a very big name. Let's be real. And I guess the kind of way we can look at it is seeing who LA Knight gets on Friday. Like if LA Knight just gets like a NXT person, which again, good for them, I think that will be seen as kind of a letdown, I guess, for the fan base. But I think the surprises in general are difficult because people will always go one end or the other. You get people who literally want people to come back from the fucking dead. And then you get other people who just go like, no, I've seen that Andre Chase is doing well in NXT, maybe they give him a shot. And like maybe they will, like one day down the line, but this isn't the opportunity for that. It needs to be a biggish name. It needs to be someone who I guess they want to win as well. This is the thing, like are you kind of predicting that both Solo and LA Knight lose, or does one lose and one wins? It's very difficult here, and it's very complicated because there's a lot of kind of feuds going on in the background. There's still that kind of noise that LA Knight might turn. We still don't know what the White Six are saying. So there's a lot of stuff here where, it could happen. But my prediction for these, I think Joe Hendry will be facing and defeating LA Knight on Friday Night SmackDown. I think that will be a very good way to kind of introduce him properly again, or reintroduce him to the main roster fans. And obviously he has appeared at WrestleMania, and he has appeared at the Royal Rumble and stuff, but he hasn't done much since, but he's been on NXT and TNA like quite a lot recently. But I do think that that's a side quest, and that the main quest is that he will go to the main roster, and I think he will go to the main roster off the back of a win against LA Knight on Friday Night SmackDown. As for Solo Sikoa, I'm going to lock in Chris Jericho. Like, I think, although it's a bold one, like, I think that there seemingly, when there's enough noise, like, saying that someone's going to do something at some point, and it's coming from multiple different sources, multiple different mouths, and all that kind of stuff, and it very much feels like Jericho is not part of AEW anymore, and is making the transition over, as most likely he wants to have a final run in the company that made him. Let's be real. Like, I think, as much as, yes, he's had fun doing the AEW stuff, and there's been some great moments, a little bit of the bubbly, and all that kind of stuff, he will always be someone who I think is more known for stuff he's done inside the WWE. And I think that it'll be just a feel-good moment, particularly in MSG, for those ticket prices as well. If it's not him, I think, unless it's one of the Wyatts to kind of further a feud, or the return of Roman, they rerun that, I think it would be seen as a letdown. So I think they've got to be very careful with both of these. I'd argue, to be fair, the A Night one, like, particularly because SmackDown hasn't been hot at the moment, I think it's not as important. But I definitely think that Solo Sikoa one next week on Raw in MSG, it needs to be someone who's going to pop that crowd and someone who's going to make an impact. Because at the moment, the tournament, like, this is the thing, they drip fed us the tournament thing as well, which helps, I guess, because people are kind of getting excited about everyone that's coming and being announced for it, and that makes sense. But it's a bit like, do we really think that The Miz is going to win it? Or Jey Uso? Like, do we think that these people are going to, like, stand a chance of, like, getting that final match? Like, no, we don't. But the noise we've heard in the room has been Gunther, has been Chris Jericho, and obviously Gunther is announced now. And that's also another thing. Usually, they announce one thing, let's make the second one bigger. Gunther thing is announced, like, it's a big thing already. Like, he's a former World Heavyweight Champion. That's the one we kind of had the feeling that he would come back more. But is he? He has to be eclipsed by someone else that's coming after him, surely. But we shall see, obviously, next week as the tournament rolls on. So, moving on from John Cena and that tournament, we are now going to talk about the WWE ticket prices and the ticket sales. Like, are they in a perilous position? And this is an interesting one because, for years, for the last few years, obviously, definitely since COVID, definitely since, obviously, the kind of structural change they've made in upper management, and with TKO seemingly kind of getting a very tight grip on these ticket prices, we have seen, ticket prices just go up and up and up. And I have to say that, obviously, wrestling fans, we get very, very into our own bubble, and I'm thinking that it's just us, but it's not. Like, it's every sector when it comes to live events. Ticket prices have increased, like, massively. Over here in the UK, we have festivals like Glastonbury who have put prices up, 10, 20, 30% year upon year upon year. We're seeing regularly that, gigs to even some of the older kind of acts that maybe aren't as, like, well known anymore, like, are creeping up. Comedy, again, like, used to be very, very affordable, but you're now seeing those, £300, £400 tickets, make their way into the industry. And this just goes into the bigger thing at the moment, obviously, in this country and in the world in general, like, everything is just going up and up and up. But what we are seeing, obviously, is that WWE have decided they are a premium product and that they would charge premium prices. And now this is a model that TKO did previously with the UFC, where they have really, like, priced it really, really high and made it a must-see ticket. And it has consequences because, let's be real, like, I don't remember the last time UFC announced, like, a quote-unquote record-breaking crowd, for it all, that it sold out tickets in 2 minutes or whatever. That used to be the old thing. I remember as a teenager or as a younger person, tickets would sell out, like, fast. Like, if you did not, get in that ticket queue, whether it being a physical one or over the phone. Remember that. I'm showing my age now, but having to phone up Ticketmaster and to book tickets. Like, if you did not get in that line, like, quick enough, like, that was it. It was sold out. But it felt very much like everyone had a fair shot because, if it was like 15,000 seats up for sale, once all 15,000 were taken, that was it. But obviously, as ticket touts and resellers kind of, have kind of dictated the market a lot, over the past, definitely over the past like 5, 10 years. Like I think since COVID, well, we've seen it really ramped up with like the bots and AI and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of how this affects wrestling, and how it affects WWE in particular, is that they price themselves out of the range of many people. And now look, without flexing, without getting into certain bits and pieces, like I can afford certain tickets, right? It's WWE, right? And I've looked at tickets over the past year or so. And, you know, since I think about 2012, 2013, I've been to at least one WWE event, whether it be a house show or a TV taping or even a PLE, either here or internationally. And I did go to SmackDown in Barcelona, and a very rainy Barcelona, earlier this year, I believe in March, as part of that kind of Road to WrestleMania kind of tour they did in Europe. But I did not go to any of the shows they did in August, and by the looks of it, I will not be going to any of the shows, including the television taping they're going to have of SmackDown in January at Wembley. I've actually go to, but it's not. It's at Wembley, and it's because of the ticket prices. I just cannot justify paying the prices they want for the product that they're going to give. And granted, I've complimented Raw, particularly recently, but I do think that has a lot of things going for it at the moment. Where you've got the John Cena Last Time Is Now tournament, where they are actually booking like decent matches. They've got a very good world title picture, and on the women's side of things, they've got some decent things going on there too. And they are obviously building up to a big PLE, you know, that being Survivor Series and building up, you know, John Cena's last match and that. But there's a lot of things that just aren't going to exist or be the case when it comes to next year, and particularly on the SmackDown side of things. I think SmackDown has not produced a good episode in about at least 6 months. And I'm not saying that to kind of, you know, go along with trends or whatever. These are just my opinions. Like I just think SmackDown's been genuinely unwatchable for the better part of this year. And a lot of that is just down to the fact that there's no challenges, there's no movement in the main championship pictures. They're not getting enough wrestlers onto the product. And yes, granted, I think they've been a little bit better with that recently, but it just seems like people just become magicians and they do disappearing acts. I mean, B-Fab next week is facing Jay Cargill, great, but where the hell have you been for like the past kind of 3 months, 4 months? Going back to SmackDown in Barcelona, I remember being there and seeing B-Fab take on Charlotte Flair. And it's very weird saying that because Charlotte Flair was very much a derided character back then on the build to WrestleMania, and it was kind of one of her first, I think it was her first singles match back. But it's like, where the hell did B-Fab go? She had a great showing out against Charlotte back then, and that, again, this is back in February, March time. And then, I mean, she maybe did like a tag match with Michin later on again, Michin, again, like someone they really need to utilise more. And they just disappear. You know, like the Wyatt Six, even with the tag belt, they disappear. I've never known situations like this, and I get that Triple H, when he came in, he tried to get people family time. He's given people days off, and look, I absolutely support that. But I just think if people are being put in positions where they are champions, where they're expected to be kind of a big part of your brand, and they disappear for like weeks, months at a time, you know, I mentioned him earlier, R-Truth, another one. You know, someone who, again, he got released, he got brought back, did the match with John Cena, again, in that bonkers kind of phase that we had, you know, in the summer with John Cena as a villain, and then just disappeared. They teased him doing like a split personality gimmick, and he kind of got involved at the start of this Damian Priest as a Black feud. Again, a feud which just, it started and it would go away, it would come back, it would go away and then come back, and we've done the big angle a few weeks ago where Damian Priest was blinded or whatever. It just seemed that people just disappear for weeks or months at a time, and SmackDown's just been unwatchable. In terms of the ticket prices, I just don't think SmackDown's worth paying the prices that they're charging. And I know a lot of people in this same position, and it's not just us old quote-unquote boomer fans anymore. It's people who have watched the product maybe since COVID, maybe since Netflix, and are seeing a decline in quality. I just feel that more of us need to vote with our feet, or our wallets in this case, and say, look, we ain't paying these prices, WWE. Like, something I did over this year, for example, when they did do TV over here, is I looked at prices, and I live 10 minutes away from the O2 by bus. If a show starts at 7 o'clock, you know, I could leave my house at 6:30 because I don't care about I don't think, you know, if they do dark matches anymore, then they just don't care about us. And I looked, and even on the day of the show, tickets were still over £100 for Raw at the O2. I looked 2 hours before, an hour before. I looked even when the show had started, like the first match was on my television on Netflix at my house, and they still wanted over 120 quid for me to come and watch the show somewhere up in the heavens. And I just thought, what the hell? Like, it doesn't make any bloody sense. And so, yeah, like, I won't pay the price that they want when it comes to going to watch them at Wembley. I'm not paying it. Some SmackDown episodes this year have had 3 or 4 matches, and they've fallen into the habit of the main event usually ends up as a smoz. By smoz, I mean kind of the usual bollocks of the interference, distraction, just real bad, like, level 1999 Vince Russo WCW level booking. And I just won't pay the price they want. SmackDown at the moment, being deadly honest, is worth 20 quid to me. Like, it's worth 20 quid at a show. Like, 20 quid, I'm happy there to sit there in the top levels and watch, a below average wrestling show. Seeing ticket prices like starting at like 200 quid, 300 quid. Seeing ringside tickets in the in 4 figures. It's bonkers. And the reason why we're getting away with this, and the reason why we're doing this, is because people are paying. Because yes, there's been blips, like a few weeks ago when they had SmackDown in Salt Lake City, and their lowest attendance for like ages. But then this week, and next week, and all the kind of weeks that are coming up, like a lot of the data is showing us that things are positive again. And so, bring me on to the next point, like, was this expected? Probably, I guess they had the highest point they could have had, definitely kind of post-COVID, with everything leading into WrestleMania 40, like it was that perfect kind of recipe, for success, where they had a situation where they were ending an historic run with a championship, which there has been many, but in terms of like how big this one was, I think the Roman Reigns is, championship reign, like that was the kind of biggest thing the company had going for it for like a long time. And they decided to end it, and they ended it, with a lot of swerve, a lot of debate, and again, we can debate on whether The Rock versus Roman was going to happen, and that was real, and it got changed, as part of the story, or not. But, it happened. I think that was the highest point they had. It was a very, very successful WrestleMania, from a financial point of view. And that's something we've got to remember now. Like, WWE are now looking at just the finances of stuff, and they are just looking to. They've said themselves they've reduced the number of domestic shows, that being the shows in the United States of America, on purpose. They've cut house shows. Nowadays, before they used to work, 4 or 5, shows a week. Now most wrestlers are only working the brand they're working on, and yeah, they get sent down to Mexico or TNA or whatever to do other stuff. But a lot of the stuff as well, remember, it's just backstage segments. You might get sent over to AAA in Mexico just to come out and do like be a guest referee, or be part of Battle Royal, or like just be backstage and just announce a match or something. It's not always the case you'll be wrestling. Whereas before, the house shows were wrestling focused, and people were putting, the guys and girls were putting their bodies on the line, multiple nights a week, and all that travel and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of them now, like, I'll be honest, they're no different from people on the UK circuit now, in that they work 1 day a week. Just their 1 day a week happens to be Monday night or Friday night, whereas over here in the United Kingdom, on British wrestling circuit at least, like, people work, it's a weekend day, isn't it? Most of our shows are Saturday nights or Sunday afternoons. But yeah, they built up to obviously WrestleMania 40, and that was done really well. And then we have the situation where it has cooled since then. WrestleMania 41 was very, very divisive, I feel, and then everything that's followed since then, including them kind of announcing New Orleans and then rescinding that and saying that New Orleans is now going to get Money in the Bank, and that WrestleMania is going to return to Vegas because it's a cash cow. They know they can sit in Vegas and they can charge premium price. Vegas is seen as a premium destination. Lord knows why. It looks like a shithole, but it is, the mecca, so to speak, of events in America, and it's a big travel destination, and they're looking at the fact that there's lots of people that are willing to come there and spend the money that they want to charge for tickets. And then the year after that, they've announced obviously they're going to Saudi Arabia for WrestleMania, and again, that is the single biggest cash cow they have. And I'm not going to debate it with anyone here, but end of the day, like, Saudi existing is good for WWE in terms of a financial point of view. It may not be good if you feel from a creative point of view, but the fact is, Saudi they were paying WrestleMania and beyond money for kind of the events they were getting already. So imagine the amount of money they're going to pay and put forward into an actual fucking WrestleMania in their country. It's going to be insane. But in terms of ticket prices and where they're at, and ticket situation, people are very quick to jump. I don't know what, I don't know where these fans came from that got obsessed with talking about gates and houses and all that kind of stuff. But it seems to be a big part of being a wrestling fan nowadays, both for WWE fans and for AEW. And I just feel a bit like, why the fuck do we care? But looking at the data and looking at what we've got, they're going to go to Survivor Series with 30,000. John Cena's Sundance main event is going to look at, I believe it's 12,000, 13,000, and it will sell out. And then the Saudi Rumble is going to be insane. And that's a stadium show. And then we've got WrestleMania in Vegas next year, which again will be huge. Like, I don't think they're in trouble, in terms of some of the bigger shows they're doing, but I do think they're going to have to watch what they do at smaller shows. I saw a post actually recently where someone said they paid $100 for front row seats at SmackDown in Salt Lake City. And I think that just shows like the power of a smaller territory where people just go, look, we ain't paying these prices. Sorry, we don't care if you invented wrestling. Like, we're not going to pay your crazy prices, for what you're going to do. And the combo ticket sales were quite down for that one, which would be interesting because they've had a couple of situations this year. Obviously, they put combo tickets. Let's not forget that whole kind of NXT getting cancelled back in May when they were going to do 4 shows over a weekend, and they had to drop the NXT because it just wasn't going to sell. People weren't happy to pay combo tickets, or not as many people bought combo tickets for that NXT. So I think we are seeing the fact that when it's in smaller territories, or if it includes kind of a smaller, kind of lesser brand, like, people aren't going to pay. But in terms of premium locations and locations where they don't visit either that often, or they don't visit often where they have the money as well, like, I think we are going to just have to deal with the fact that it will come at a premium. And so I think the only thing you can do as fans is vote your wallet, because ticket prices won't stay that high if the houses aren't that full. End of. We've got the situation that went on recently with Nixon Newell, formerly known as Tegan in WWE, and her real life partner, Martina Elise. So, this has been reported on, and I'll just tell you the facts. Like, essentially, they were not hired, they were not signed to AEW contracts. They were brought in as what's known as enhancement talent. That means they are there to enhance other performers, and they made, in my opinion, a very, very bad call. They did one match and they lost, as enhancement talent does. And then they showed up at another set of tapings, and they kind of read the plans and decided that it wasn't for them. And they put that they were kind of said they could go home, they wanted to, but let's be real, they were told to fuck off. Like, that's possible way. Like, I get that they feel they wanted more, but I always say to talent, that I book, or talent that I used, that I speak to, you've got to take the rough of this move. And I think that this is a situation where they haven't done. So for those of you that don't know, like, what they did is they decided they didn't want to lose. They were unhappy with the booking of their match, and basically it's not for us. And again, that's something that, people have free will in this, and they're entitled to do what they want to do. But this is a job, and I think that, particularly with someone like Tegan, who I think she was moaning on like Instagram back in the summer, saying how the bookings have dried up since WWE. And I think I've noticed that for a lot of people, like even over here, like a lot of the old kind of NXT UK talent, like they're struggling to get bookings, and getting used to kind of the realism of the fall from grace in that sort of way, where a lot of shows just won't pay the prices they want. And I think Tegan potentially saw that too, because I think she came back over here and she tried some stuff, and it, nothing really worked. So you'll think that when she was given something, even though yes, it's maybe not something that she wants, that she'd at least just give it her all. Because look, I'm not the biggest AEW fan, and don't get me wrong, I am actually going to AEW Dynamite next month, and because my last point, to be fair, because their tickets are much cheaper. Tony Khan, he doesn't really know what he's doing with the women, in my opinion. It's a very complicated women's division he's got there, because he's got the elephant in the room being Mercedes Moné, who is obviously hogging a lot of the TV time, a lot of the titles. There are some other highlights from the women's division, I think, in AEW, and I think that Tony Khan has shown that if you kind of persevere and stick up with a lot of his kind of nonsense, he will do something with you eventually. And if there is the thought process that they will get women's tag belts, and of course they will, because it's AEW and he just cannot help but love a belt now. I think that it could have been one worth just sticking around, because surely I'd rather be wrestling than not wrestling. And I think they've shot themselves in the foot, personally. But we should see how this situation develops, because it does feel a bit like, well, if she's not going to go back to WWE, and it's seemingly like the door's being closed on AEW, like where does that really leave you? Like TNA, that's owned by WWE potentially. Do you come back over here? Do you do international shows? Like, I just feel a bit like, if you're booked to do something like that, like you should just do it. And if she left afterwards, like fair enough, or didn't want to come back afterwards, but to leave a taping, like I think it just makes you seem like a bit like a prima donna, and not very grateful for the opportunity that you've been given above other people, who then went and did the situation. I think in terms of being a wrestler, you need to just do whatever you need to do to get the fans happy. Talent needs to make sure that they're doing the stuff that's required of them, and that's quite simple. That's kind of been all I've had to talk about today. Like, I hope people have enjoyed what I have to say. I don't know how often this will kind of be. I'm aiming for weekly, maybe twice a week. Probably short episodes, to be fair. If you've liked me, then yeah, please share this around. If you haven't liked me, then, well, still share it around and say how much you hate me. It's good for the algorithm at the end of the day. Anyway, love you, leave you.